This was not an emotional outburst. This was a takeover years in the making. After being humiliated by her father and pushed out of the family business, she disappeared, changed her identity, and built her own company in silence. While her family underestimated her, she studied their weaknesses, bought key assets, watched their debts grow, and waited for the perfect moment. That moment came at Thanksgiving dinner. Her father thought he was about to announce a business deal, but he had no idea the person behind the acquisition was sitting at his own table. The daughter he ignored had become his most dangerous competitor.
If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story is for you. I'm Ava Reed, middle child of the Reed real estate dynasty, and being underestimated is my secret weapon. As I stepped into our Chicago mansion for Thanksgiving, no one knew I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of our lives. They just saw quiet little Ava. They had no idea. The big announcement my father was planning wasn't just a business move, it was the trigger for a revenge plot he would never see coming. If you get what family business drama feels like, stick around. Leave a comment, subscribe, and watch me turn my father's pride into his biggest downfall. I grew up in Winnetka, a wealthy Chicago suburb, in a massive Tudor house with an indoor pool and a landscaping team on payroll. We were the picture-perfect American dream. My grandfather, Samuel Reed, founded Reed Innovations with one duplex in the 70s. It was a respected local business until my dad Richard took over in 1995. He ballooned it into a $50 million empire, building luxury towers across the Midwest, and he made sure we knew it was all him. There were 3 of us, Reed children. Ethan, the 38-year-old golden boy, was handed a vice president title after college, though he was on his yacht more than he was in the office. I was the overlooked middle child, the one who actually got my grandfather's eye for architecture. I was drawing floor plans at 12, winning design competitions, and graduated top of my class at Northwestern. I had a vision for the company. But to Dad, I was just a placeholder. Then there's Chloe, 29, the baby who used our last name to build a career as a lifestyle influencer. Chloe loved the old money look but couldn't care less about zoning laws. She'd post selfies at construction sites, acting like a design expert while contributing absolutely nothing. Our mother, Eleanor, was from a well-known Chicago family, and her strategy for dealing with conflict was to pour another glass of Sauvignon Blanc and pretend it wasn't happening. She tried to mediate, but always ended up protecting my dad's ego, especially when he was brushing me off. Richard maybe listened to Ava's idea. She'd start, but would fold the second Dad glared at her. Eleanor, this is a real project, he'd sneer and turn back to Ethan to talk golf. Every family dinner felt like a board meeting I wasn't invited to. My dad and Ethan would talk business and permits, throwing around acronyms while I sat there, knowing more about urban planning than both of them. If I dared to contribute, Dad would flash a condescending smile and say, "That's cute, Ava. Why don't we leave the important decisions to the men?" The breaking point was when I was 22. Fresh out of college, I created a groundbreaking plan for a sustainable mixed-use community, something years ahead of the curve. I spent months on it, building models and running the numbers. My father reluctantly let me present to the board, treating it like a favor. I can still remember my heart racing as I walked into that boardroom, my portfolio clutched in my hand. The board members were all his golf buddies, old men who just stared at me blankly. I wasn't even 10 minutes into my presentation when Dad cleared his throat, checked his Rolex, and held up a hand. "All right, I think that's enough," he said, his smile cold as ice. "Ava, sweetie, it's very creative, but it's totally impractical for a company like ours. Our clients want classic, not some trendy green experiment." He then laughed to the board. "She's just out of school, full of these naive ideas. Now, can we get back to business?" I felt my face flush with humiliation as they laughed, and I packed my things. That was the night I decided to leave Chicago. I would build my own company, something so big my father couldn't ignore it. I moved to Austin with just $5,000. My parents called it my little adventure. "She'll come crawling back when she's broke," I heard my dad tell my mom over the phone. The first couple of years were tough. I lived in a tiny apartment in a sketchy part of Austin, burning through my savings fast. I ate ramen noodles, drank cheap coffee, and worked non-stop, first for a small architecture firm, then as a freelancer. Every single dollar went back into my own company. I launched Apex Dynamics using the name Alex Monroe. The initials were for Ava Monroe, but nobody ever knew. I had to build this on my own, completely free of the Reed name. I began by flipping small houses and designing retail spaces, reinvesting every single cent of profit. Within 3 years, I had a small crew and an office in downtown Austin. The turning point was securing financing for a massive sustainable community project, a bigger, better version of the one my father had laughed at. Investors wanted in, but I refused to give up any control. Over the next 7 years, Apex Dynamics exploded, buying smaller firms and expanding nationwide. We were soon worth over $200 million. And the whole time, I was just Alex Monroe. In the real estate world, Alex Monroe was a visionary but very private CEO who almost never did interviews or attended industry parties. For the handful of times I had to show my face, I'd tweak my appearance and have my COO handle all the talking. My family had no clue. During the occasional holiday phone call, I'd tell them work was fine or that I was staying busy. My dad never bothered to ask for any details. He'd already dismissed me as a failure, and that was perfect because I was building Apex into the very weapon that would take him down. They had no idea that for the past year, I had been strategically buying up the land and contractors connected to my father's big legacy project. I analyzed his plans, identified every vulnerability, and positioned Apex to seize control. 6 months ago, my CFO made an anonymous offer to partner with him through a holding company. My father, as I knew he would, rejected it instantly. Now, 10 years after he humiliated me, I was on a flight home for Thanksgiving. Reed Innovations was outdated and failing, and I was about to become his biggest competitor and his only hope. The week before the holiday, I was in my corner office with a view of the Austin skyline, signing the final papers for the biggest deal of my life. My assistant walked in with my travel info. "Your private jet to Chicago is booked for Tuesday," she said, placing the folder on my desk. "Are you sure you don't want the legal team there with you?" I just shook my head. "No, this one's personal. I need to do it myself." Later, my phone buzzed. It was Sophie, my best friend from my struggling days in Austin. "Are you really going through with this Thanksgiving disaster?" she asked. "It's been 2 years." I sighed, staring out at the city. "I have to, Soph. I need to see his face when it all happens." "I just keep thinking about that awful Christmas 2 years ago," she said, "when your dad toasted Ethan's promotion to executive VP, while you were quietly closing a 9-figure deal he knew nothing about. That memory still burned." Dad raised a glass to the future of Reed Innovations, staring right at my brother, who was so hungover he was useless that morning. "This Thanksgiving will be different," I told her. "This time, the game changes." That evening, I packed my suitcase, selecting every outfit like it was a piece of battle armor. The old Ava was gone. My luggage was full of armor, all right. A sharp Tom Ford suit, a Dior dress for the Thanksgiving dinner itself, and Louboutin heels, each a quiet statement of success. A Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta bag, and classic diamond earrings from Cartier. It wasn't flashy, but it all whispered wealth. For so long, I had hidden my success from my family. Now, I wanted them to see the signs before I dropped the bomb. Tuesday morning, I boarded the private jet I almost never use. I prefer to fly commercial. But this was no ordinary trip. On the 4-hour flight, I reviewed the acquisition papers one last time, making sure every clause was airtight. It was almost funny. For years, I flew coach back to Chicago, stuck in a middle seat eating stale crackers, all while I was building the very company that allowed me to land like this. The jet touched down at a private airfield outside Chicago, where a black Maybach was waiting on the runway, another small indulgence for this trip. Driving through the familiar winding roads toward Lake Forest, I felt a mix of nostalgia and pure determination. The Ashford estate looked the same as always, a giant Tudor mansion with manicured lawns, now dusted with November snow. A huge Christmas wreath was already hanging on the massive front door. I told the driver to wait, took a deep breath, and climbed the familiar stone steps. Mom opened the door herself, her face glowing with excitement. Her eyes scanned my outfit. "Clara, darling," she said, her hugs smelling of expensive perfume and wine. "You look so successful. Is that a new watch?" "Just a little something," I said, hugging her back. "Good to see you, Mom." She led me into the massive foyer, chattering about dinner and Chloe's latest live stream. I just nodded, placing my bag on a marble table. "Home, with all of its baggage. Your father's in his study," Mom added. "He's buried in some big deal. Super secretive, he won't even tell me." I managed to smile. "I'll just pop in and say hello." Dad's study was his fortress, dark wood, old leather, and mountains of financial reports. I knocked once, then pushed the door open, a small act of rebellion. He looked up, his glasses perched on his nose. Surprise flashed across his face, then was gone, replaced by his usual detached mask. "Clara, you're here." He gave me a stiff, quick hug and pointed at a chair. "Flight from LA, okay?" "Perfectly smooth," I said, ignoring the chair. "I took a private jet." "Saves so much time." Confusion flickered across his face. "Private? That's a huge expense." I just shrugged. "Business has been very good." Before he could question me, his phone buzzed. "Excuse me, I have to take this," he said, turning his back. It was the perfect opportunity. My eyes darted to his desk, and there it was, the acquisition proposal from Apex Capital Partners, with my firm's logo right at the top. My pulse hammered, was calm when he hung up. Sorry, he said, sliding the papers into a file. Big moves at the company. It's complicated, that old dismissal. It didn't even sting anymore. Of course, Dad, I'll let you work. I walked out of his office and went upstairs to my childhood bedroom. Mom had preserved it like a museum of my youth. Debate team trophies, math awards, a Stanford banner still hanging on the wall. They were dusty relics of a past life, of trying to impress a man who never noticed. After a quick shower, I found Leo in the den nursing a whiskey at 3 in the afternoon. He had Dad's height and swagger, but a lifetime of ease had made him soft. Well, look what the cat dragged in, he smirked, raising his glass. The runaway sister, still playing with other people's money out in LA? Something like that, I said through a clenched jaw. How's that little investment fund of yours? Finally turning a profit? His condescending tone was a bitter taste of home. Before I could even answer, my sister Chloe swept in, phone held up to film her grand entrance for her followers. Clara's home, you guys. Family reunion vibes, she announced, giving me 2 quick air kisses. You look amazing, sis. Finally land a rich husband? Nope, just working hard, I said, moving away from her camera. Leo pulled his new girlfriend into the frame, whispering to her while Chloe filmed. That's Kenzie, she's 24, a fitness model. On cue, a tall blonde walked in, wearing designer jeans and a sweater that fit her like a glove. Leo wrapped an arm around her, beaming. Kenzie, this is my sister, Clara. She's in LA doing some finance thing. His wave of a hand dismissed my entire career. Oh, I love LA, Kenzie gushed. The boutiques on Rodeo are to die for. Our painful chat was interrupted by Dad's voice booming from his study. The words were faint, but his excitement was clear. Yes, that's perfect. We'll sign tomorrow, after the holiday. 90 million is the final number. Apex Capital has been playing hardball on the terms. I slipped away to the kitchen, needing to breathe. The staff here had always been kinder to me than my own flesh and blood. Elena, our housekeeper for decades, was chopping vegetables for dinner. Miss Clara, she said with a genuine smile, it is so good to have you home. You look so well. LA must be good for you. Thanks, Elena. Can I help? She waved me off. No, your mother wants a perfect day. A very big day, she said. Your father has a big surprise. I nodded. I wondered if the entire staff knew about the deal before his own daughter did. So I've heard. The cocktail hour was a masterclass in dysfunction. Mom floated around with a bright fake smile. Dad glanced at his phone every 2 minutes. Leo bragged about his new ski condo in Aspen, and Chloe filmed it all for her online audience. I sipped my Chardonnay, observing them. I wasn't the little girl desperate for their approval anymore. I was a business owner about to change their entire world. Dinner's served, Mom announced, leading us to the dining room where generations of Sterlings had eaten. I took a slow, deep breath and walked in, knowing that before this night was over, nothing would ever be the same. The Sterling Thanksgiving dinner was always a spectacle. A massive mahogany table gleamed under a crystal chandelier, set with the heirloom china used only on holidays. Silver candelabras with tall ivory candles lit the massive centerpiece of autumn flowers that Mom no doubt ordered from New York's most expensive florist. I had to laugh. I was seated at the absolute end of the table, as far from my father as physically possible. Of course. Leo, the heir apparent, was at Dad's right hand with Kenzie beside him. Chloe was on Dad's left. Mom sat at the other end with me, a whole universe of polished wood separating us from the real center of power. Elena and the staff brought out the courses, starting with a creamy wild mushroom soup. Then came a kale salad with toasted pecans, and finally the main event, a 25-pound turkey, glistening and golden, with every side dish imaginable. Dad carved it like a surgeon while Chloe filmed, narrating for her followers. And here's Daddy, carving the turkey just as his father did. The Sterling tradition of excellence continues. I saw Mom flinch at Chloe's performance before draining her wine glass. That had to be at least her 4th since I got here. After we were all served, Dad raised his glass for the annual Sterling gratitude speech, where we all had to say what we were thankful for. It used to mean something. Now it was just a contest. Leo went first, as the eldest son always did. I'm grateful for another banner year at the Sterling collection, he began, though my own research showed they'd lost significant bookings for 2 straight quarters. And for my new Audi R8. He squeezed Kenzie's hand. And for this amazing woman, and our new life together. Kenzie beamed and kissed him, while Chloe pretended to gag behind her phone. Then it was Chloe's turn. I'm just so grateful for hitting 2 million subscribers this year. My new partnership with Radiant Beauty has been a dream, and I love sharing the Sterling family's legacy with all my followers. She flashed a perfect smile at Dad, who gave a nod of approval, despite his constant jabs about her influencer career. When my turn came, I set down my wine glass and spoke with intention. I am thankful for the hard lessons, the ones that teach you that rejection can be a gift, that grit matters more than your last name, and that true success is built, not given. I raised my glass to carving your own path. Dad's brow furrowed, catching the edge in my tone, before launching into his own speech about the legacy of his hotel empire. Mom gave a vague toast to family and health, her words slurring slightly. Dad kept checking his watch, whispering to my mother, whose smile grew tighter and tighter as the meal wore on. Leo dominated the conversation with stories of celebrity guests he'd supposedly charmed, while Chloe kept interrupting to read comments from her Thanksgiving leave stream. As dessert was being served, Dad suddenly tapped his fork against his crystal glass, the chime cutting through the chatter. "I have an announcement to make," he said, standing at the head of the table like a king addressing his court. A man used to every eye in the room being on him. The table went still. Even Chloe lowered her phone. "As you all know, I have poured my entire life into making the Sterling Collection a benchmark for luxury. But all empires must evolve, and the time has come for a new chapter." He paused, letting the suspense build. "I have decided to sell the company." Leo choked on his Cabernet. "What? Dad, you have to be kidding." Dad held up a hand to quiet him. "I have been in talks with a very eager investment group for months. The deal closes tomorrow morning." Chloe let out a theatrical gasp. "But Daddy, what about the Sterling legacy? My entire brand is built on being a Sterling heiress." "That brings me to the second part of my announcement," Dad said, his face a perfect mask. "The money from the sale will not be passed down to you children as an inheritance." At that, both Leo and Chloe exploded. "That is our birthright!" Leo slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "What do you mean?" Chloe cried, her camera now broadcasting the family meltdown to all her followers. "Where is all the money going?" Dad waited for their shouting to subside. "Your mother and I will use a portion for our retirement. The rest will launch the Sterling Foundation, a charity to support education in the hospitality industry." Leo shot to his feet, his face flushed with rage. "I gave 10 years to this company. You promised me I would run it one day. You promised us." Chloe was now openly weeping, though she made sure to angle her phone for the most dramatic shot. Amidst the chaos, I sat perfectly still, taking a small, deliberate sip of wine. Mom's gaze landed on me, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Clara," she said quietly, "you don't seem very surprised." The chatter at the table faded as all eyes turned to me, like they'd suddenly recalled I was even there. "Actually," I started, placing my wine glass down gently. "I just have one question." I met my father's gaze. "Who's the buyer?" Dad's ego inflated, loving that he was the center of attention. "A major digital firm. Nexus Media." He beamed. "They're offering $75 million, which is frankly a miracle in today's publishing world." I took a slow sip of water, letting the silence hang in the air, thick with old resentments. "Dad," I said at last, my voice perfectly steady, "I am Nexus Media." The room went completely still. The old grandfather clock in the hall seemed to tick louder, counting each second of sheer shock. For what felt like an eternity, no one even took a breath. The silence was so total, it felt brittle. I saw a storm of emotions cross my father's face: confusion, disbelief, and then the first flash of raw fury. Liam broke the spell, shoving his chair back with a crash, spilling his Cabernet. The red wine soaked into the tablecloth like blood. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shouted, his gaze bouncing between me and Dad. Sophie, of course, was still filming, her hands trembling as she recorded the meltdown for her followers. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Did Ava just say she's Nexus Media? The firm buying Donovan Press?" Mom reached for her wine, realized it was empty, and grabbed the whole bottle. I stood up slowly, feeling calm now that the bomb had dropped. "Me, Dad," I said. "Ava Josephine Donovan. But for the last decade, I've been known as AJ Pierce, the founder of Nexus Media." My finally spoke. "That's insane," he sputtered. "Nexus is run by AJ Pierce, a legend in the tech world, not my daughter who messes with little websites in Boston." I didn't pull out a business card. I just took out my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. An article from Wired was already on the screen. "Actually, Dad, I'm AJ Pierce. I started Nexus Media 10 years back, right after you called my digital strategy a cute hobby." Dad grabbed the phone, his eyes locked on my photo beneath the headline. "This has to be a joke," he said, but his voice was shaking. "Nexus Media now owns your main paper supplier and your biggest distribution network," I explained calmly. "We also acquired majority shares in the 2 top literary agencies that bring you 90% of your best-selling authors. Buying Donovan Press is just the final piece of a 2-year plan." "You've been spying on us," Liam accused, his face a mask of disgust. "That is illegal." "No, Liam, it's called research. Everything I know about Donovan Press came from public filings and industry reports, all completely legal." I looked back at my father. The truth is, this company has been sinking for years. Your lists are stale, your business model is a fossil, and you've lost a third of your readers in 5 years. How dare you, Dad started, but I interrupted. I tried to help you. 6 months ago, Nexus Media made an anonymous offer to partner. It would have kept the Donovan name on the books while we funded the digital transition you need to survive. You turned it down flat. Dad's face went pale with recognition. The Mercury Initiative, that was you. I simply nodded. I wanted to give you a way to save the company without your ego getting bruised, but you refused. So you've been scheming against your own family, Liam shrieked, plotting a hostile takeover. Not hostile, Liam. A legal purchase. For $75 million, which is way more than this publishing house is worth. My voice stayed level, hiding the storm inside me. And let's be honest, this stopped being a family business the day Dad decided only one of his kids would ever be in charge, no matter how incompetent that kid is. Sophie finally put down her phone, the gravity of it all hitting her. So are you, like, our boss now? She whispered. Technically, yes. Although the entire executive team is being replaced. Dad leaped up, his chair scraping loudly on the hardwood floor. The deal is off, he roared. I won't sell my legacy to my own daughter for some childish revenge. I just shook my head. The contracts are signed, Dad. The board approved it this morning. The announcement goes live tomorrow at 9 a.m. As of this afternoon, Nexus Media owns Donovan Press. I'll see you in court, he threatened, but his eyes told me he knew it was over. Your lawyers will do what exactly? I asked softly. They already approved the deal. They told you it was the best offer you'd ever see. What's your legal argument? That you're angry the genius CEO you admired from afar is actually your own daughter. Mom finally spoke, her voice sharp through the haze of Merlot. All this time, Ava, you were building an empire and we just assumed. That I was struggling, I finished for her. Yes. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You have a choice, as Ava. Right now, be my daughter, or be the woman who took my company. You can't be both. The ultimatum was so predictable it was almost pathetic. 10 years ago, those words would have shattered me. Now, it just confirmed everything I already knew. That's where you're wrong, Dad, I said quietly. I'm both. I always was. You were the one who refused to see it. Sophie was openly sobbing now, mascara streaking down her face. What about us? Our trust funds, our status. That, I replied, depends on if you want to contribute to the company or just collect a check. Liam pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this on Christmas, didn't you, to humiliate all of us? I did this on Christmas because I knew you would all be here, I corrected. And because 10 years ago, at this exact Christmas dinner, Dad made you vice president, despite you having zero qualifications. Meanwhile, my degree from Columbia and 3 years of digital marketing experience weren't good enough for an entry-level position. Dad's face turned beet red. That was different. Liam is my son. And there it is, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The real reason, it was never about my talent or my work ethic. It was because I wasn't his son. The raw honesty of it silenced everyone. Even Liam looked down at his plate. This is over, Dad barked. Everyone out. He stormed out of the room, and a second later, his office door slammed. Mom got to her feet a bit unsteadily. I should go check on him, she murmured, but paused beside me. Are you really worth $100 million? I nodded. And all those holidays you missed. When you said a flight was too expensive. I was building my company, Mom. I needed you to think I was a nobody. She rested a hand on my shoulder, her expression unreadable, before following Dad. Soon I was alone at the table, staring at the ruined Christmas dinner. The food was cold, the candles were nearly gone. The family I'd wanted so badly to impress was gone, too. This was supposed to be a win. But I just felt hollow, knowing I finally had their respect, but I'd lost any chance at their love. I escaped to my childhood bedroom as the storm erupted stairs. I could hear Dad shouting on the phone to his lawyers, with Momsa trying to calm him down. Liam's furious yelling punctuated the noise, along with Sophie's dramatic wails. My room was a time capsule, same single bed, the desk where I'd spent nights designing websites and writing business plans. The shelves were filled with books on marketing and classic literature. My journalism awards and academic medals were covered in a thin layer of dust. And none of it had ever mattered to the one person I needed to impress. I ran a finger along the spines of old notebooks, pulling one down. The pages were filled with mock-ups, content strategies, and the initial code for the algorithm that became the heart of Nexus Media. It was funny in a sad way. The whole empire began in this room, the one place on Earth I always felt like a ghost. A sudden sharp knock made me jump. I opened the door to find Liam, his face red from anger or bourbon, probably both. We need to talk, he grunted, pushing his way inside. I shut the door, crossing my arms and leaning against it. What about Leo? How I wrecked Thanksgiving, or how you want to inherit a company you drove into the ground. You really think you're clever, don't you? He spat, stalking around the den like a cornered animal. Little Chloe with her coding and her secret life. Did you enjoy lying to all of us this entire time? About as much as you enjoyed stealing my ideas, I retorted. Remember Christmas 6 years ago when I told you we had to pivot to a subscription model? Dad said it was a foolish trend, but 2 months later, you pitched the exact same idea like it was yours. Leo froze, his expression twisting. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who put in the damn hours at the office while you were off in San Francisco proving some kind of point. You put in the hours, sure, but what did you actually accomplish, Leo? Besides maxing out the company card on lavish client dinners and using your office to sleep off your hangovers. His face went rigid with rage. You have no idea what you're talking about. I landed the Blackwood account. Blackwood only came to us because I personally called their CTO as Seraph Garrett and recommended your services. It was all part of my plan to buy you out, I told him. And I know exactly what I'm talking about because I've been auditing the company's financials remotely for the last year, including the files you thought were hidden on the local drive. All the color vanished from his face. What are you saying? I know about the $300,000 you embezzled through shell corporations, Leo. I know about the fake consulting invoices that went straight to your private Cayman Islands account. I know all of it. He lunged toward me. You can't prove a thing. I have the wire transfers, the account details, and the server logs that show the entries were made from your computer. On days you were the only one logged in. I met his stare. I'm not going to the police, Leo. The scandal would kill the company. But you will not test me. He seethed, his hands balling into fists. You'd stab your own brother in the back? I'd hold a criminal accountable who happens to be my brother, I corrected him. It's not the same thing. We stood there in a heavy silence before he finally spun around. This isn't over, he snarled, yanking the door open. Actually, it is, I said to his retreating back. You just haven't caught on yet. I'd barely shut the door when a new knock came. This time it was Maya, her makeup flawless again, despite the faint tear stains on her cheeks. So you're like a secret tech mogul, she stated, waltzing in and flopping onto my bed. That is honestly pretty awesome. I couldn't help but laugh at her complete 180. Is that what you were saying 10 minutes ago? You seemed pretty devastated about your social standing. She shrugged, inspecting her manicure. I'm flexible. It's a crucial skill for an influencer. She glanced up, and I could see the calculations in her eyes. Think of the content we could create. My sister, the software genius. My followers would go crazy for that story. Is that why you're in here, Maya? To propose a joint venture? More like a mutually beneficial partnership, she said, adjusting her designer dress. You need an image that makes you look less like a robot. And I need to be associated with real success, not just free products. Her pitch was so brazenly self-serving and so typically Maya that I almost had to admire it. And what about actually doing some work? Learning the family business? Contributing something besides your Instagram stories? She wrinkled her nose as if I'd suggested cleaning toilets. Ew, no, that stuff is so boring, and meetings literally drain my will to live. But I could be the face of the brand, be a brand ambassador, represent us in the lifestyle market. A lifestyle ambassador for an enterprise data management firm, I repeated slowly. Are you even listening to yourself? Maya stood taller. Fine. Mock me like everyone else, but my social media reach is a real asset in today's market. Whether you get it or not, I built my own brand from scratch, same as you. I had never thought of it like that, and for a moment I was genuinely speechless. She had a bizarre point, even if our values and work ethics were from different planets. I'll consider it, I said at last, but not right now. She nodded, satisfied with her small win. Just so you know, I already posted a teaser about a huge family business announcement. My engagement is off the charts. After she left, I settled at my old desk and pulled up my laptop to review the last acquisition papers. Another gentle knock broke my concentration. Come in, I called out, assuming it was a housekeeper with some tea. But it was Mom, looking remarkably sober for how much she'd been drinking. She had swapped her evening gown for a simple cashmere set, leaving her Boston socialite armor behind. Your father has barricaded himself in his study with a bottle of whiskey in the corporate charter, she said, perching on the window seat where she used to read me stories. He thinks he can find some clause to block the sale. He can't, I stated simply. His own legal team already confirmed it. She nodded, her gaze sweeping across my childhood room. You know, I kept everything just as you left it. I always assumed you'd come home after you got this little rebellion out of your system. It was never a rebellion, Mom. It was my life's work. $200 million, she murmured, shaking her head slightly. My daughter built a company that valuable while we thought she was barely getting by. I swiveled in my chair to face her. You could have called. Any of you could have asked about my work with genuine interest, but nobody ever really wanted to hear about it. Tears started to form in her eyes. I knew, Chloe. Not the details, not the scale of it all, but I knew you were brilliant. I saw it when you were a girl. How your mind just worked on a different level, seeing things the rest of us missed. She dabbed at her eyes. I just didn't know how to nurture that in this family, not with a man like your father. You could have stood up for me, I said, the familiar anger rising in my chest. All those times he belittled me, embarrassed me in front of the whole family. You just stood there. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I told myself I was just keeping the peace, being a good wife. But I see now that I failed you as a mother when you desperately needed an ally. Her simple confession broke through a wall of ice I'd built around my heart for years. I came here expecting a war, lawsuits, and accusations. I never once prepared for genuine remorse. So what's next? Mom asked into the silence. Tomorrow morning, the buyout is announced. Donovan Industries will become a division of Apex Innovations. The family name will stay for now, but the entire leadership structure is being replaced. I paused, then added, Dad and Leo are being offered figurehead advisory roles, if they even want them. It's mostly for show during the transition period. And you'll move back to Boston? I shook my head. No, I'm staying in San Francisco. That's where the new headquarters will be. She nodded, seeming to understand everything I wasn't saying. That I was done with this house, this drama, and the role they had written for me. Your father might never forgive you for this, she said softly. I know, I answered. But this was never about his forgiveness, Mom. It's about finally being seen for who I am. After she was gone, I stayed up all night, finalizing every detail for the morning's announcement and ignoring Zara's frantic texts. When the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I put on one of my sharpest pantsuits, slicked my hair into a severe bun, and applied the minimal makeup I wore for my infrequent public events. This morning was either going to be a new beginning for the Donovan family, or it was the end. Either way, I was prepared. When I walked downstairs at 7 a.m., the house was eerily quiet. Our housekeeper poured my coffee without a word, her expression a mixture of fear and admiration. The grand dining room had been scrubbed clean of last night's Thanksgiving disaster. There was no trace of the family's implosion, only a thick, suffocating tension. I glanced at my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive team, all on edge about the 9 a.m. public announcement. There was also a new text from Zara. Did you detonate the bomb? Any survivors? I was just typing my response when Dad appeared in the doorway. He looked 20 years older, the lines on his face etched deeper, his usually perfect posture gone. He hadn't slept at all, my study. Now, his command was absolute. I followed him down the corridor and into the room that had always been the seat of my family's power. The dark mahogany walls were lined with his framed accolades. Magazine covers with Dad's face, business awards, pictures with senators and local tycoons. There was, naturally, no evidence of my own success, though my college graduation picture was on a side table, mostly obscured by other photos. Dad sat behind his enormous desk, a power play he'd used for years to dominate any conversation. I didn't take the chair opposite him. Instead, I walked over and sat on the edge of his desk, immediately flipping the power dynamic in a way that clearly rattled him. My lawyers confirmed your story from last night, he said, his voice flat. The sale is ironclad. The board's decision was unanimous. Of course it was, I shot back. Sterling Designs has been bleeding clients for 3 straight years. Your methods are outdated, your executive team is bloated, and you have no new ideas. They knew a lifeline when they saw one. 60 million, he mumbled, looking defeated. This firm was worth 90 million just 2 years ago. The firm was overvalued 2 years ago, I said flatly, and I offered a hell of a lot more than anyone else would have. They'd have sold it for parts and buried the Sterling name. He glared at me. Is that your plan? To tear down your own family's legacy? I still respect what Grandpa built and what you preserved. The Sterling name is staying, but the business is about to change, from the ground up. For the first time, I saw a flicker of actual fear on his face. What exactly are you planning? I had waited over a decade for him to ask for my professional opinion. The irony was almost painful. Sterling Designs is becoming the bespoke projects division for Nexus Dynamics. We'll modernize your classic lines and integrate them with our AI modeling platforms. We're keeping about 60% of the artisans, but management is getting a complete overhaul. And me? He asked. The words hanging between us. You're being offered the role of chairman emeritus. No real power, but you'll keep an office and advise on key legacy accounts. His jaw went rigid. A mascot. A respected consultant, I corrected him. With a full health plan and an incredibly generous salary, he suddenly got up and walked to the window overlooking the sprawling estate. For a long while, he just stared out at the gardens built with generations of sterling money, his back to me. How did you do this? He finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Build something so massive from absolutely nothing. No connections, no startup cash. I had my degree, I reminded him. The one thing you paid for, and I had a burning desire to prove you were wrong about me. He turned around to face me. I always thought you would fail. I know. Most people did. I mean, 90% of new businesses don't even survive the first few years, I thought. He hesitated, like he was searching for the right words. I thought I was protecting you from all that inevitable failure. By making damn sure I never got the chance to even start? I arched an eyebrow. That's not protection, Dad. That's control. He winced at the word. Maybe. I took the foundations my father left me, and I made it 10 times bigger. I thought I knew what was best. But you didn't, I stated simply. You were wrong about me. You were wrong about where the market was going. And you were dead wrong that Ethan was the right son to take over. When I mentioned my brother, his face turned to stone. Ethan has his issues, but he is completely loyal to this company. Ethan has been stealing from the company for at least 3 years, I told him, straight up. And I have the bank records to prove it. That's one reason I made my move now, before he could sink the whole ship. Dad stumbled back into his chair, as if the news was too heavy to hear while standing. That's not possible. Over $500,000 funneled through shell corporations set up as fake materials suppliers. The evidence is airtight. But why would he do it? He has a massive salary, a huge trust fund. Poker debts, I said, high-stakes games, from what our forensic audit uncovered. Dad buried his face in his hands, then looked up at me, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. So my son was a thief and my business was dying and I didn't see any of it. The brutal honesty in his voice threw me. I was braced for more anger, more denial, not this hollow confession. Not blind, I said, my voice softening just a bit. You were just looking the wrong way. A deep silence filled the room, heavy with years of arguments and things left unsaid. When he finally looked up, his voice was different. The arrogance had vanished, replaced by what sounded like genuine curiosity. How did you do it? He asked again. For real. No contacts, no investors who knew the Sterling name. How did you build something this big? I could have been vague, but for the first time, his question actually felt real. I started small, I told him, explaining how I took freelance design jobs just to raise some capital. Then I developed a proprietary AI platform that solved a huge problem for architects, connecting their old design files to new cloud-based systems. It was based on that proposal you shot down when I was 22. A spark of memory lit his eyes. The one about the rendering software. I nodded, shocked he remembered it. Yes, I perfected it, made it more powerful, and used it to land our first major clients. I reinvested every single penny, lived on ramen in a tiny apartment for 3 years, and hired a team of brilliant people who bought into the vision. Without the Sterling name to open any doors for you, he said, almost to himself. So in a way, I had to correct him. See, being underestimated is a powerful advantage if you use it. Nobody ever saw me coming. He almost smiled at that. Clearly not. Another silence passed, but this one felt different, less like a battle. I glanced at my watch. The acquisition goes public in 45 minutes. We need to figure out the next steps. What happens to Ethan and Sophie? He asked. Ethan gets a choice. He can resign quietly with a decent severance, or he can face criminal charges for embezzlement. As for Sophie, I paused. She actually gave a brilliant pitch last night for being our new brand ambassador. Her social she influences is incredibly powerful, if used the right way. Dad looked absolutely floored. You'd keep them on board after everything? This was never about revenge, Dad. It was about taking my place as family on my own terms. He nodded slowly, his eyes falling to the unsigned papers on his desk, then meeting mine with a strange new light. You completely outmaneuvered me, he said, and I was shocked to hear something that sounded an awful lot like pride. Your grandfather would have been impressed. Coming from him, that was the closest thing to approval I had ever heard. A complicated feeling washed over me. Not triumph, not exactly forgiveness, but something new. I learned from watching you, I admitted, even when you had no idea I was paying attention. He reached his hand across the massive mahogany desk. Well then, Chairman Emeritus. I shook it, sealing the first real deal we had ever made as equals. Welcome to Nexus Dynamics, Dad. 6 months after that explosive Thanksgiving, I was standing in the new Chicago headquarters of Sterling. The old design house was unrecognizable, bright, open workspaces, cutting-edge tech, and a feeling that respected the past while rocketing into the future. My job as CEO of the parent company meant I split my time between here and our main office, managing the merger and our new product lines. The integration had some hiccups, but overall it went better than I could have imagined. Dad surprised everyone by embracing his new role with unexpected grace. Once the initial fury faded, he discovered he loved coaching the younger designers and reconnecting with his oldest clients. We even started a weekly meeting for him to share his decades of industry knowledge. I actually found myself looking forward to them. For the first time, we were building a relationship on mutual respect, not resentment. Ethan's situation was, well, messier. When I showed him the evidence of his fraud, he immediately threatened to sue me and the company. But he eventually saw he had no other moves to make. He took the deal, pay back the stolen money, step down from his VP role, and get a master's degree in finance if he wanted a future here. To my shock, he chose business school over being blacklisted. He's now halfway through his first year and occasionally calls me with sharp questions about market strategy. Sophie has absolutely thrived as the new face of our consumer lifestyle brand. It's a small but fast-growing division that desperately needed her social media talent. Her followers ate up the family business drama, which she cleverly spun into a story of female empowerment and redemption, instead of the ugly truth. Her online campaigns got our products into a younger demographic we had been trying to reach for years. But Mom, she probably had the biggest transformation. Freed from her role as the family diplomat, she drank less, started volunteering for a women's literacy program, and even joined the board of a startup incubator for female founders. I want to help other girls like you, she told me, so their mothers don't make the same mistakes I did. Walking through the office these days, people smile or nod respectfully. I'm not some anonymous founder, or Arthur Sterling's forgotten daughter. I'm just Clara, the CEO who saved a legendary family business and created something new for everyone. My assistant's voice broke my train of thought. Your father is in the main conference room with the quarterly numbers, she said, and your mother called to confirm your dinner plans with the new investors. I thanked her and started toward the meeting, but paused at the new company timeline installed in the lobby. It showed the entire history, from my grandfather's first workshop to Sterling's success. My picture was finally on that wall next to my grandfather and my father. 3 generations of leaders, my work finally given equal weight. Thanksgiving was just around the corner, and this year I knew it would be different. We tried a smaller family dinner, something real without the phony traditions of our old get-togethers. No forced thank you speeches, no shop talk, just us. We were all learning how to actually listen to one another again. The path from family outcast to running the company was harder than I ever imagined when I left Shiksugo 10 years ago. Juggling the business and my own family takes a patience I'm still trying to find. And sometimes the weight of old hurts threatens to erase our progress, especially when old habits sneak into tense meetings. You know, buying the firm wasn't the hardest part. The real work was rebuilding relationships that could survive our shared history and our new roles. Dad still sometimes falls into his old commanding tone before catching himself, and I still brace for a criticism that never comes. But slowly, the Harrison family is finding a new rhythm. Mom hosted a dinner last month where, for the first time I can remember, everybody talked, everybody listened, and nobody stormed off. Small victories, but they felt huge. The biggest moment came late one night at the office as Dad and I were reviewing first quarter results after the merger. The numbers were just incredible. Client retention was at 98%, and new contracts had boosted revenue by 32%. He looked at the spreadsheet and said, "You've already done more than I did in my first 10 years running this agency." That one sentence healed a part of me I didn't even know was still wounded. It wasn't that I needed his professional approval anymore. It was the human approval I had wanted my entire life. This whole experience taught me that professional success can't fix a broken family. The thrill of proving everyone wrong felt good for a minute, but it was empty until it led to a genuine connection. I had to learn the difference between winning and healing. As I walked into the boardroom where Dad was waiting, I thought about the long road from that disastrous Christmas fight to this very moment. The lesson I learned wasn't that success is the best revenge. It's that success without reconciliation is just a hollow victory. The real win wasn't proving my father wrong. It was when we found a way to both be right together. For anyone watching who knows the pain of a family business, who's felt invisible to their own family, I hope my story gives you some hope and also a warning. Building your own success is powerful, but healing family wounds takes more than a great quarter. It takes honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to grant second chances, even when you feel they aren't deserved. Have you ever faced something like this in your own family business? Drop a comment and share your story. How did you manage the complicated overlap of family and work? Like, subscribe, and share this if it resonated with you. thank you for following my journey from being an outcast to finding peace. And remember, the real measure of success isn't what you build alone, but what you can finally build together.